Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayet Kashtaprayesha Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Sranvata Swakatha Krishna Punyashravana Kirtanaha Hridyantastoya Bhadrani Vidhanoti Surutsatam. Hare Krishna. We are reading today from Canto 3, Chapter 15, verse 47. Tam tvam vidam bhagavan paramatattvam sattvena sampratiratiim rachayantamesham yatte anutapaviditairdrida bhakti yogair udgrantayo ridhi vidur munayo viragaha gaha. Synonyms, word-to-word translation. Tam, him, tvam, you, vidama, we know, Bhagavan, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, Param, the Supreme, Atma Tattvam, Absolute Truth, Sattvena, by your form of pure goodness, Samprati, now, Ratim, love of God, Rachayantam, creating, Isham, of all of them, Yat, which, Te, your, Anutapa, mercy, Viditai, understood, Drida, unflinching, Bhakti Yogai, through devotional service, Udgranthaya, without attachment, free from material bondage, Hridhi, in the heart, Viduhu, understood, Munaya, great sages, Viragaha, not interested in material life. Translation and purport by Joan Grace Abhishar and Arvind Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. We know that you are the Supreme Absolute Truth, the Personality of Godhead, who manifests his transcendental form in the uncontaminated mode of pure goodness. This transcendental, eternal form of your personality can be understood only by your mercy, through unflinching devotional service, by great sages whose hearts have been purified in the devotional way. Purport. The Absolute Truth can be understood in three features: impersonal Brahman, localized Paramatma, and Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Here it is admitted that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the last word in understanding the Absolute Truth. Even though the four Kumaras were instructed by their great learned father Brahma, they could not actually understand the Absolute Truth. They could only understand the Supreme Absolute when they personally saw the Personality of Godhead with their own eyes. In other words, if one sees or understands the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the other two features of the Absolute Truth, namely impersonal Brahman and localized Paramatma, are also automatically understood. Therefore, the Kumaras confirm, you are the ultimate Absolute Truth. The impersonalists may argue that since the Supreme Personality of Godhead was so nicely decorated, it was therefore not the Absolute Truth. But here it is confirmed that all the variegatedness of the Absolute Platform is constituted of Shuddha Sattva, pure goodness. In the material world, any quality, goodness, passion, or ignorance is contaminated. Even the quality of goodness here in the material world is not free from tinges of passion and ignorance. But in the transcendental world, only pure goodness, without any tinge of passion or ignorance, exists. Therefore, the form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his variegated past tense and paraphernalia are all pure Sattva Guna. Such variegatedness in pure goodness is exhibited eternally by the Lord for the satisfaction of the devotee. The devotee does not want to see the Supreme Personality of Absolute Truth in voidness or impersonalism. In one sense, the absolute transcendental variegatedness is meant only for the devotee, not for others, because this distinct feature of transcendental variegatedness can be understood only by the mercy of the Supreme Lord and not by mental speculation or the ascending process. It is said that one can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead when one is even slightly favored by him. Otherwise, without his mercy, a man may speculate for thousands of years and not understand what is actually the Absolute Truth. This mercy can be perceived by the devotee when he is completely freed from contamination. It is stated, therefore, that only when all contamination is rooted out and the devotee is completely detached from material attraction can he receive this mercy of the Lord. We can offer some prayers and then get into the discussion. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Vascharya Deshatarine. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivas Adigaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So, we're in the final stages of the long journey that the Kumaras had taken to go to Vaikuntha, and then the yesterday's words and today's, and then the next three verses are kind of the end, in one way, the result of their journey to Vaikuntha, where they have, after their especially unexpected experience that they had with the with both Jaya and Vijaya, finally they had the darshan of Vishnu in his form of Padmanabh, along with Lakshmi Devi and all his entourage. And these 5 verses are, in a way, their outpour of their expression, of their emotion, of their journey, and all the experience that they had. It's kind of these five verses are outpouring of their emotions. And it's interesting, till a moment, even when they actually came into Vaikuntha, and when they were having the whole discussion with both Jaya and Vijaya, they were staunch believers in the non-impersonal form of Brahman. So they were the impersonal Brahmavatis, as even Srila Prabhupada also puts it in the beginning of the purport. So they were the staunch believers that the Brahman, or the Brahma Jyoti, is the ultimate absolute truth. But as we see in this verse, they're actually saying that the form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the transcendental form, is the absolute truth, which Srila Prabhupada kind of explains in detail in the purport. And the transformation actually happened after their discussion with Jaya Vijaya. Once Jaya Vijaya was cursed, and then as Padmanabha started coming, the aroma we have heard from devotees in the past few weeks, the aroma that was coming from the tulsi, from the lotus feet of the Lord, kind of entered their nostrils, and as Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur puts it, kind of created an agitation in their heart. And because of the agitation, these two were in the realm of peace under Brahman. And once they experienced the taste, the sweetness of the aroma that is coming from the tulsi leaves from the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, that sweetness they never experienced any of that kind of sweetness, because under Brahman there's no emotion, or like this kind of it's a peaceful realm where there is kind of there's no possibility of exchanges of dealings. And when there is no exchange of dealings between two personalities, then the whole experience of sweetness or even bitterness kind of doesn't exist. So for them it was completely new. And when they have experienced that sweetness, that caused agitation in their heart, and that agitation kind of gave birth to this realization in their hearts that, oh, this form of the Lord. And as we have seen in the previous verse, they wanted to have the darshan more and more. So once they had the darshan once they tasted the sweetness of that tulsi aroma, they again go back and then kind of want to take darshan more and more. So they were looking back at the lotus feet again. They were going back this way, and then they wanted to kind of experience that sweetness as much as they could. So it was a kind of, in one sense, a transcendental chaotic situation that they were in, which was completely new for them. And in that situation, so that's kind of that's the precursor to what happened before they started speaking in the previous verse and this verse. And as is also the standard across any prayers that we hear throughout the Bhagavatam or any Vedic scriptures, whenever any of the devotees, either they are they first had the darshan, which you also seen in the beginning of this chapter also, when the demigods, once there was this darkness across the universe, once they went to Lord Brahma, the first thing that they actually did was a long list of prayers, and that happens at the glorification of that specific personality, whoever they go to. In this case, demigods glorify Lord Brahma for all the services and for all the assistance that he does for the Supreme Lord. That happens in multiple places. Anytime when we see, either in the case of Prahlad Maharaj or Dhruva Maharaj or Queen Kunti, or we will take any example, the first section, if we kind of divide the prayers that they are rendering before submitting the petition that they want to actually submit, the first section, what happens is the glorification. And in this case, it's interesting. They have, as Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur kind of also Srila Prabhupada, how he puts it in his purport. So the previous verse and this verse are kind of, because it's a section of 5 verses, if we kind of break it down, this verse and then the previous verse kind of categorize into the first section, if we kind of put it that way. And in these 2 verses, as we can clearly see, they are glorifying the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his form, because that's a kind of a new revelation for them. So they are in that mood of glorifying the Supreme Lord and kind of establishing his position, or that your transcendental form is the Supreme Absolute Truth. And in doing so, what they're also actually doing is they're also paying their gratitude and then their respects to the devotees who have helped them kind of come to this position. So it's a combination. These 2 verses are, in one sense, a direct glorification of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And through glorification to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as like these 4 Kumaras are quite knowledgeable, so they understand, as Lord Vishnu puts it in multiple places, that my devotee of my devotee is my devotee. So they kind of understand that aspect. So in they're not just glorifying the Supreme Lord directly, but they're also kind of in one sense paying that we are able to stand in front of you and experience the aroma of the sweetness of the tulsi, and then have this realization that your absolute, this transcendental form is the Supreme Absolute Truth. And for that to happen, there are a sequence of steps that happened. And in one sense, the last 2 lines of this verse are explanation of what their mode of gratitude is. And there is also a connection to the previous verse, so we'll kind of go through what they're actually trying to say in the mood of gratitude. So in the previous verse, we have seen, as they were explaining about, so we'll just quickly read the previous verse. They say, the Kumara said, our dear Lord, you are not manifested to rascals, even though you are seated within the heart of everyone. But as far as we are concerned, we see you face to face, although you are unlimited. The statements we have heard about you from our father Brahma through the years have now been actually realized by your kind appearance. So this is the first the part of gratitude that they were doing, where they're remembering the role that Lord Brahma played in their lives, where even though they were kind of these Brahmavadis, which in fact Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur puts it that when they were referring to Pitranu Varnita, which basically is Pitra, is his father, Varnita, which he was kind of describing all the glories and the pastimes of the Supreme Lord, his transcendental form, because as we understand from Brahma Samhita and other points, both Lord Brahma and Narada Muni were in the realm of Bhagavan Poshakas, which basically means that they were worshipping the transcendental form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So they were in their interactions and in their dealings, they were neither rejecting the level that Kumaras were in, but even in that position, they were kind of always giving them this realization of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in its transcendental absolute form. And once they were there, they always kind of received that. So it was in the previous where they're saying that we are able to stand here in front of you and kind of even able to, in a situation, to see you and understand the glories of you because of the role that both my brothers In one sense, Narad Muni is their brother, and our father kind of played, and they are kind of acknowledging both of their roles by using that word of Pitra Anuvarnita, which they're saying that they have constantly kind of explained that verse. And in spite of their, as we have just discussed, in spite of their impersonal and beautifully, Srila Prabhupada actually puts it, I think, in the end of the previous verse, where he says, in spite of their, this is how he writes, in spite of their impersonal beginnings, due to their opportunity to learn Vedic knowledge from Brahma, in the end, became direct seers of the personal feature of the Lord. So that's the first part of their gratitude, expression of gratitude, where they're kind of acknowledging the role both Lord Brahma and Narad Muni have played in there. And the next thing, what they are doing in this verse is they're basically explaining a chain reaction on what, in a way, kind of led to. So we have seen the external manifestation of their transformation was through the aroma that they have experienced through the nostrils of the tulsi leaves. But in this, so that's kind of the external manifestation of that what happened. But why were they? As we all understand, it's not easy. Like when Lord Krishna went to Kurukshetra, to Hastinapura as a peacemaker, we all know that even though he was in person there, Duryodhana and other section of the audience who were there were not able to understand the platform of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but whereas Vidura and other devotees were kind of clearly seeing it. So it's not that just because you're kind of in the presence of the Supreme Lord will kind of automatically give you the qualification to understand his position, but there is something underlying that. So that's kind of the external layer, but underlying to that, even though you're present there, but what kind of makes you qualified, or what makes you qualified to understand his position is again delineated by kind of this verse kind of goes in detail. They're kind of expressing what why were they qualified enough to receive that mercy. So they are saying it's a kind of chain reaction, as I'm seeing it, kind of as Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur also puts it, is the first thing they're saying is we can perform unflinching devotional service when our hearts are purified in devotional way. And the previous verse of saying that Pitranu Varnita is them acknowledging that because our hearts are purified in a devotional way because we were able to hear from Lord Brahma and Narada Muni through all these years of your glories. So us kind of exposing ourselves to the glories of you through our years, we were able to purify our hearts in a devotional way. So that's the first step that they are kind of acknowledging in the previous verse, and then the beginning of this verse where they're saying we are able to perform unflinching devotional service because our hearts are purified in devotional way, which Srila Prabhupada kind of also goes in detail in the purport, where he talks about that only when all contamination is rooted out and the devotee is completely detached from material attractions can he receive this mercy of the Lord. So the Kumaras are explaining that we are able to receive your mercy because we perform unflinching devotional service, and only because we were able to perform unflinching devotional service because our hearts were purified by Lord Brahma and Narada Muni. And second, they come and say that because we performed unflinching devotional service, by performing unflinching devotional service, which comes in this the second part of the verse, where it says, this transcendental, eternal form of your personality can be understood only by your mercy. So that part where they're saying that by performing unflinching devotional service, we can be recipient of the Lord's mercy. And then they say, only by being the recipient of the Lord's mercy can we understand his form, which is manifested only in the mode of pure goodness. And it's interesting. So the first thing they're saying is that their hearts are purified in a devotional way through the oral reception of the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And because of that, they have now become the recipients of Lord Mercy. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur kind of goes back in the previous verse, in one of the verses, where he says, only a person who is recipient of the devotee's mercy is eligible to receive the Lord's mercy. And only when we receive the Lord's mercy will we be in a position to kind of see his form. And So as we kind of were talking in the earlier, so by acknowledging the position of Lord Brahma and Narada Muni, they are saying that because we were able to receive their mercy, by which they were kind of um, in a way helping us to by helping us by kind of always narrating these past times, we are now able to in a situation where we are able to receive your mercy, and because of that and everything that kind of happened, we are now able to see your form and appreciate the glories of your form. And there's an interesting word that they actually use, which is the Shuddha Sattva, which Srila Prabhupada translates as pure goodness. And then he goes in further in the purport where he talks about how in the realm of the transcendental world, the pure goodness is not kind of tinged, doesn't have any kind of connections to the other modes of goodness or modes of passion or modes of ignorance. But in this transcendental mode of pure goodness, can we actually realize the Supreme Personality of Godhead? And it's interesting the use of the Shuddha Sattva, because if you see again the connection, what is the connection of Shuddha Sattva? So the connection is again goes back to Bhagavad Gita and then the Chaitanya Charitamrita, where when Krishna is answering in the 14th chapter, where he was saying, Srila Prabhupada kind of comments to that verse in the 14th chapter, 26th verse, the Mamcha Yogya Vicharena Bhakti Yogena Sevate. That verse, Srila Prabhupada actually comments saying that this verse is Krishna's answer to the question that Arjuna raised previously, where he was asking, how do we achieve transcendental position? With that statement, what Krishna is saying is that you can achieve Brahma Bhuyaya Kalpate, you will be able to achieve the transcendental position by Bhakti Yogena Sevate, by performing devotional service without fail, which is Avya Vicharena, which is without fail. When we perform devotional service without fail, that's when we will be able to achieve transcendental position. And that's what even the Kumaras explaining here, that they have performed this unflinching devotional service, which is Avya Vicharena Bhakti Yogena Sevate, and that they were able to perform only because their hearts were purified in a devotional way, that their hearts were able to purify in a devotional way because they have constantly rendered service to Lord Brahma and Narada Muni, not just by being in their presence, but by kind of constantly exposing themselves to hearing the glories of the Lord and kind of rendering various other services that they did. And also, as this is the kind of the final point that I want to end with, the Shuddha Sattva is basically, there's a kind of much further explanation, but for the lack of time, Shuddha Sattva in essence basically means being under the control of Lord Balram. As we understand, there are various energies of Krishna, and one of the energies of Krishna is basically Sandhini Shakti, which is under the control of Lord Balram, and which in essence Shuddha Sattva is basically means being under the control of Lord Balram. So, and as we understand, Lord Balram is being the Adi Guru, and all of our spiritual masters. In one sense, both Lord Brahma and Narada Muni, in their position as the spiritual masters, are an expansion of Lord Balram. So by using the word of the pure goodness or the Shuddha Sattva, what they are kind of acknowledging is because we were always under the control of Lord Brahma and Narada Muni. When I say under the control, not the physical control, but kind of being in their presence and kind of assisting in their services, they are acknowledging, saying that because we were always, because of that flexibility of being there in that position, we had this. We are now having this good fortune of experiencing your understanding, not just experiencing, but understanding that your transcendental form is the absolute truth, and only that is happening because, as they're saying in the first verse, the personality of Godhead who manifests his transcendental form in the uncontaminated mode of pure goodness, and we are only able to understand your form because we were able to be in this Shuddha Sattva by the mercy of Lord Brahma and Narada Muni. So that kind of the Shuddha Sattva, and this verse is a kind of a step, is a ladder, is a clue ladder that they're giving us by kind of how do we get to that position of not just being in front, face to face to Radha Shyam Sundar, but kind of be able to understand in a situation to understand the position of Radha Shyam Sundar as the absolute truth is that when we perform the unflinching devotional service through purifying our hearts in a devotional way, and how do we purify our hearts in a devotional way is when we become recipients of the Lord's mercy. And for us to become recipients of the Lord's mercy, the first step is to kind of become recipient of the devotee's mercy. And that happens when we place ourselves under the shelter of Lord Balram, Adi Guru, or his manifestation in our lives. We are kind of blessed with so many spiritual masters. So when we are kind of place ourselves voluntarily under the shelter of Balram and the spiritual masters, that's when this kind of chain reaction happens, where ultimately we'll be in a position to, as Kumaras are, even though the experience was in many ways not what they were kind of expecting to have once they entered into Vaikuntha. But ultimately what happened was the agitation that kind of led to the transformation of their hearts. In similar ways, once we kind of place ourselves in the position of being always under the shelter of the spiritual masters, then like it happened with the Kumaras, maybe the experience might not be what we envision, or sometimes we might have some kind of not so pleasant experience. But the ultimate end result, as happened with the Kumaras, will be the agitation that will lead to the transformation of their hearts. And that agitation, in the case of Kumaras, it has happened through the aroma of Tulsi. And for us, it could be something else. So all we can just have to do is just place ourselves under the shelter of Lord Balram and kind of always perform Abhya Vicharena Bhakti Yogena Sevate under the direction like how Kumaras have performed. That's what I would like to end. If there are any comments or questions or corrections, the floor is open.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Prabhuji, thank you for the wonderful, explanation of stuff. And, I have only one question. Probably this question has been asked many times and answered also. The Kumaras were already Brahman realized, and by smelling the Tulsi leaves, they become, like Bhagavan realized. They've seen the Bhagavan, everything. They've even had a glimpse of Vaikuntha. Why did they not stay in Vaikuntha, or were they not permitted to stay in Vaikuntha? I want to understand that. Why did they have to return back?
And I don't have a specific answer, but I mean, just extrapolating in the case of Narada Muni's pastime, we see that Narada Muni in many pastimes enters Vaikuntha, but then he realizes that his service is not just being in Vaikuntha, but there is much more service that he has to perform in his role of being being the traveling preacher, of kind of going around and performing the devotional service, as we've seen in the case of in Srimad Bhagavatam itself, where they're going around and kind of teaching the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So they kind of go there, experience the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, taste the sweetness, and they come back and kind of for our purification. And as we have seen in the previous, I think one of the previous class, the discussion that we were having, later on, at this point, I don't think Kumaras have started the whole sampradaya of Kumara Sampradaya, which later happens once they have had this darshan in Navadvip Dham of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So that's when, by then they were actually performing devotional service. But once they had this darshan of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Navadvip, that's when they start the whole Kumara Sampradaya and all of that. So so that's also, I think, as they see their service is much more required in the realm of material universe rather than just staying back in Vaikuntha.
Yeah, Prabhuji, I think that makes sense. But the reason I asked that question is Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita and in so many other places, anyone who comes to my abode will never go back, So that's why I asked the question. Thank you.
And in one sense, as Srila Prabhupada also puts it, like wherever a devotee goes, um, that place becomes Vaikuntha. So Srila Prabhupada also left Vrindavan, but wherever he went, for our benefit, he made Vrindavan. So in the case of Kumaras also, wherever they went, it's not that they are leaving Vaikuntha, it's just that they are taking Vaikuntha with them.
Okay, Prabhuji. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Guru Srila Prabhupada. Very nice class, Prabhu, and a very nice question answer time. I like that. Like, I remembered a story which I heard long time ago in Indradimna Swami's class. That there was Narada seeing Ambarish Maharaj's brother. He was totally opposite to Ambarish Maharaj. He was like an atheist or who wouldn't want to talk to Narada Muni. But he said, Narada Muni asked him, he won't even talk to him. So Narada Muni just asked him, okay, you can answer one question. And how can you explain the greatness of spending a moment with a devotee of the Lord? So if ever you are in a trouble, you remember this question, ask this question to that person. And that's all. That's the advice Narada Muni gave to him and left. So finally, Ambarish Maharaj's brother had to meet with Yamaraj. So he said, I have this question for you. So then he was to, Yamaraj said, I don't know this answer. You can go find out from other places. So he went to find out. He went first to the demigods and Lord Shiva, Lord Brahma, and finally to Lord Vishnu's abode. And then he's asking Lord Vishnu, can you explain me the significance, how precious it is to me and spend that moment spent with a pure devotee of the Lord. So Lord Vishnu asked him, what does it matter? Where are you standing now? So that question alone took him from to the eternal abode. And that means he could be there permanently. So that amusing story came to my mind. Yes, I think I agree with you. The Kumaras and Narada Muni, they are all traveling preachers and they don't care for any residence. I think and that may be the reason. Very good question, Radha. Kunja Bihari Prabhu. Thank you so much, Hare Krishna.
Thank you for the
Thank you,
story.
Mataji. Wonderful, wonderful story. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna.
Nothing then. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripasinubhyaya. Jai Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Yes.